think it was the best debate I've ever personally that I've had. We're getting polls that show 92 to 6, 88 to 11. We're having a lot of great polls that just came out. There are polls, I guess, phone polls and lots of other polls, but you see the polls. A very important debate. Now, she wants to do another one because she got beaten tonight, but I don't know if we're going to do another one. I mean, every poll shows they lost, and they lost badly. Now, with all of that, it was obviously 3-on-1, but I think we did great.
Vice President Harris said that she wants to make healthcare free for all. So how do you think that will help the education system? And also, what do you think are going to be the negative impacts of it?
I think that Kamala Harris wants to get health care to as many people as possible, but she understands the realities of how difficult it is to get legislation through Congress. She's been one of the most successful people in doing it. When I think about her as a senator and as a sitting vice president, and Tim Walz as a former congressman, and all of what they learned of getting tough legislation through Congress during those first 2 years of the Biden administration, I think she's going to take a lot of that knowledge and experience and understand that you got to find consensus in order to be able to get health care to more people. You got to get the votes, and you got to get legislation through Congress. So I think she will be ready to do that.
And would that help the mental health crisis for public schools?
Oh my gosh, mental health crisis is a crisis indeed. And we have to have more investment there, clearly. One of the reasons why I'm glad that we expanded Medicaid in North Carolina, because it's going to help us with more providers. It gave the signing bonus that the Biden-Harris administration gave us for expanding Medicaid. We are investing a lot of that in mental health right now, which we know is just critical.
Thank you. How do you see public health in the education system, and what do you think Congress can do to help students with mental health and substance use prevention?
There's a real need for that right now. In fact, I sat down and met with the various school boards for the state of Illinois, and we're in the middle of a mental health crisis. Many of our school districts added on some counselors, full-time counselors, during the COVID crisis with COVID money, and that money is ending, and they're very much worried that they're not going to be able to afford those counselors at a time when we actually are seeing an increase of mental health needs among our young people in our schools. So I certainly am supportive of it, and I know Kamala is as well. But this is an issue that is going to be ongoing, and we need to make sure we put the resources behind providing counselors and other active mental health services.
And do you think Vice President Kamala Harris's plan for free-for-all health care is going to help students, or what do you think about it?
Well, look, I think that ultimately, we as a nation should work towards making sure we can start off with Medicare buy-in to make sure that everybody can have access to health care. The Affordable Care Act started that step forward, and you see that when people have health care, they like to have health care, but we need to do more, and we also need to make sure that people can afford to access health care. At the same time, we need to make sure that the healthcare professionals are there. One of the problems we have right now is a real shortage of mental health counselors and mental health professionals, especially for younger children.
My main concern in public life has been ending the chronic disease epidemic in our kids. The biggest threat to our children. 3.4% of kids have chronic disease. We're spending $4.3 trillion, and it's bankrupting our country. 77% of American kids are inadequately military. We have the sickest children and the sickest population. We're spending 5 times our military budget on chronic disease, and we shouldn't be.
How have you seen the effects of public health on the education system, and what do you think Congress can do to help?
What do you mean by public health?
Mental health.
I'm thinking mental health. Thank you for asking that. I'm thinking of mental health. You know that through COVID, our children's mental health, and I've talked to administrators and teachers and students, our children's mental health really was made more difficult. You know what I'm really proud of? Through the American Rescue Plan, through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan, through the Safer Communities Plan. What did we do in the last Congress when Democrats were in power? We put $2 billion toward mental health for students in our schools. That's the kind of work we have to continue to take care of our children. But take a look at what's going on. We had the recent school shooting in Georgia. We're making a difference. Homicides are down. But mental health has to be a primary focus of what we're doing.
And Vice President Kamala Harris said that she wanted to make healthcare free for all. So how do you think that will affect students?
Well, you know what? Donald Trump wants to make IVF free for all. So guess what? Government can do good things. Mental health care should be available, accessible, and affordable for everybody. We can do it.
Look, I think, first of all, Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party because he received millions of votes, and Donald Trump has been explicit that he wants to promote a culture where life is welcomed into this community, into our country. He supports fertility treatments. He wants to make them more accessible. He's been crystal clear on that. Now, that said, I think that it's ridiculous that Democrats are saying that Donald Trump wants to take your fertility treatments away, when in reality, Democrat policies have made it harder to afford children, made it harder to afford a home to put those children in, made it harder to afford the groceries with which to feed those children. Their policies have been a nightmare, and so they're trying to scare Americans with promises and threats that Donald Trump is going to take away their fertility treatments, when in reality they're saying that because they don't have any solutions for the problems the American people are facing.
President Kamala Harris, I was wondering, she said that how she wants to have healthcare free for all. So how do you see that impacting students and young people in the United States?
You saw from this debate that Kamala Harris would be a president for all Americans, including young Americans. So in terms of issues such as healthcare, she's talking about strengthening the Affordable Care Act, which has not only brought down costs, but allowed it so that if you have a pre-existing condition, whether you're a young person or a senior citizen, insurance companies cannot deny you health insurance coverage.
So the mental health crisis has been a big topic among young people. So I was wondering how she's going to combat that, especially since it's a big time since COVID-19.
President of the United States, she's going to have a priority in making sure that people get access to mental health services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Donald Trump said in an interview that he wants to shut down the U.S. Department of Education. So how are we going to standardize education and make sure the students' needs are met?
Well, I don't know that meeting students' needs always requires standardization. Frankly, I have a vision for education that aligns with President Trump's, where we have 50 different laboratories working on sound education policy, unlocking the potential of school choice. The Department of Education is a big old building in Washington, D.C. that educates no children, that creates a lot of paperwork for our teachers and for our administrators. And frankly, if we reduce that down to the smallest footprint and devolved a lot of that power to the states, then best practices would emerge and they would be copied, and we would see rising student achievement.
Certainly.
I'm a high school student in Pennsylvania, and I was wondering, how will Kamala Harris help the public education system in America?
Well, she's made clear that she wants to help public education, invest in public education. She believes in our public education system, and having that foundation is going to help lift everyone up, lift up all children of God. And I think that that's critically important, that we invest in our young people. We've invested an historic amount in public education here in Pennsylvania, combating an unconstitutional education system by driving dollars into the districts that need it most. She and I share those same values when it comes to investing in and believing in a strong public education system.
President Donald Trump said in an interview that he wants to shut down the U.S. Department of Education. So how will education be standardized and meet the needs of students if that does happen?
You know, this is a very interesting question you raise. If you look at test scores in the United States, since the creation of the Federal Department of Education, our scores in readiness is actually down from when it was created in 1979, I think is when they created it. So there's a strong evidentiary argument that has the Federal Department of Education been successful. And I mean, the goal is to have high quality educational standards in the United States. Well, has that actually happened over the last 44 years? Doesn't really look that way. I think if you go down that process of closing the Department of Education, Title I funding, things of that nature, you're probably going to block grant that to the states. Let the states have far more control of how they're going to deal with Title I funding. Every state's going to do it differently. California will do it different from Florida, etc.
But would that make education different in different states because states have more power?
No, not really, because at the end of the day, states, when it comes to standards, for the most part, they typically mirror each other anyway. There are basic facts in education that are going to be articulated. Like math doesn't change because you don't have a federal Department of Education. I think we did pretty well educating people with math before that agency was created. We were putting people on the moon and we developed a nuclear bomb. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be glib, but mathematics standards if we're going to be honest, seem to have decreased since the creation of the Federal Department of Education. When it comes to ELA, English Language Arts, the tried and true method of phonetical reading, of diagramming sentences, of learning how to put together paragraphs and then essays. You don't need a Federal Department of Education to do that. When you're starting to look at history, the facts of history are what they are. You don't need a Federal Department of Education to lay out the guidelines of history. We were doing that before it was created. So the basis of educating children, we've been doing that before that agency was even created. So I think the logic stream that you need that agency in order for that to continue is illogical.
How will Kamala Harris contribute to improving the public education system to better students?
Great question. So, the first thing, let's just do a compare and contrast. In the President Trump's agenda and his Project 2025, or even his Agenda 47, he's calling for the demolition of the Department of Education. And so that's going to be a very big problem for the country, because one thing the Department of Education is trying to do, and we can argue about how successful it is trying to even out the K through 12 public education system. What we know is if you're in a good zip code, you can probably get a good public school education, but if you're in an urban city or something like that, you probably can't. And so I think that's something that the team is working on. How can we import talent? How can we use technology? How can we create a flatter, fairer education system that provides more opportunity for people?
If you look at, I can just say my state, people don't like what the Biden administration has done. They don't want an open border. They want massive inflation. They want a better economy. We're losing full-time jobs right now, and all the Democrats in the Senate have voted for this stuff.
I think it's going to effectively prosecute what you had and where we're at.
Is he responsive to that?
Yeah, I think I think the president feels like he achieved his goal tonight of challenging her that you own this. You talk about all the things you're going to do. Why should we believe it?
If the question of who answered the questions more directly tonight, I think Donald Trump wins on that metric. Kamala Harris evaded most of the questions asked of her. But what you did hear from Donald Trump is, let's focus on the issues that actually matter to the voters, the illegals who are crossing the southern border, the people who have actually created law and disorder across cities, the abandonment of law and order across cities in this country. And I think that was the appropriate place to take this discussion and do what Kamala Harris says she wants to do, which is to look forward. That was a little bit of the Orwellian doublespeak of the whole evening for Kamala Harris. She says, Donald Trump, we're sick of the name calling. She's the only one calling people names, calling him disgraceful. She's calling him a criminal. She used those words numerous times, yet calls him out for name calling. Same thing, you want to turn the page forward, yet retroactively talking about views of the last election. So there was a doublespeak throughout the whole debate that I do think.
I think the fact that she has taken positions that favor the middle class, that she has laid out an economic plan that's going to help control costs, I think that, along with women's reproductive freedom, I think even foreign policy will play a role here. Donald Trump cozies up to the dictators. When he was president, he turned away a lot of our allies. I think that Kamala Harris will lead our country on the global stage with strength, and I believe that she will be able to show some of that tonight.
We have a plan and a strategy for low-carbon green growth. At the same time, we're exporting more oil and gas than any time in U.S. history. That's a remarkable record, and she can lay claim to that record. That said, she's about a new generation. She's not Joe Biden, and she sure as hell is not Donald Trump. She represents a new generation of leadership, and tonight you're going to hear her not only defend the record, but she will prosecute the case again about a future, a compelling future to address the inflation scars and the stress people feel around housing prices and grocery prices. She's laid out a vision on that. She'll amplify that on a stage tonight, and she's going to shine.
The U.S. produces energy cleaner, safer, and smarter than anywhere else in the world. If someone actually cared about the environment, you would want to have all the energy produced here, and then we would sell it to our allies. Instead, Biden-Harris shutting down natural gas export permitting processes. I mean, it's a legal business to build an export facility. You get a permit, you're a private sector business. By executive order, they say, no, you can't do that. You know who is celebrating? The Kremlin was celebrating. People in Qatar were celebrating because they're saying, "Wow, great! I guess the U.S. wants us to be able to sell energy to Iran and Iran itself becoming again getting their exports up in a huge way, and Russia." So now where are we now? Now we're fighting two proxy wars. One against Russia and one against Iran. Both of those wars are being financed by the Biden-Harris energy policies, which are attacking U.S. energy and supporting foreign providers. So I think it's completely upside down. It's hurting American citizens in terms of inflation, and that's what I think our energy policy is. And one anonymous staff person saying, "Oh no, she doesn't think that anymore," that's not proof to me. I think President Trump's been very clear. He understands how energy prices drive inflation, and he wants to get energy prices down for all Americans. He understands that energy is a component in every product, not just the gas you put in your car or your electrical bill. And he also understands that strategically wars are fought over energy policy, and he knows that one of the ways we bring peace in the world, stop our adversaries, is to make sure we've got a strong U.S. energy.
So young voters are less likely to vote than older people. So what message do you have for younger voters?
You know, this is just as important as if you're going to graduate from college, if you're going to go to college or high school, if you're going to go out there and get a job in the future. Voting allows you to pursue those opportunities to the fullest extent. Everything a president does impacts kids and students and all the way down to little tiny children and what their life is like. So don't ever think your vote doesn't matter, especially in this election. It's going to be very consequential, the amount of people that show up and place that vote. And I think for a lot of people that would be considered the younger adults, for them, this ripple effect that this election will have will be here for 25 to 30 years. It's just that much of a consequential election on what can be done to really secure this country for the future.
Young people are less likely to vote than older people, so what message do you have for young voters?
I would say be involved, because you're going to be the ones that deal with the solutions and the outcomes of these decisions. There's no disrespect to people who are, I guess, baby boomers now. No disrespect to them, but some of the major outcomes from these policy decisions are not going to be borne by them. They're going to be borne by Gen X, Gen Yers like me. They're going to be borne by Gen Zers. So, the old saying is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I would advise young people to be at the table, but I would also advise them to really educate themselves and not just fall into vibes. Because vibes don't set policy. Serious policies is what we need.
Thank you.